To Sheriff Harlan Decker, Dr. Aubrey Hayes was just another black woman with a parking violation and legal excuses. An easy ticket, an easier tow. He positioned himself with years of badge authority weaponized into certainty. Then came the handcuffs, the backseat cage, the booking photo. What he couldn't see was the constitutional expertise concealed behind that mugshot, years of legal scholarship. The principal architect of Georgia's Vehicle and Traffic Law Modernization Act, the law professor who testified against his promotion after 3 sustained brutality complaints. He assumed she'd submit quietly, pay the fine, maybe hire a lawyer. He was catastrophically wrong. And in minutes of bodycam footage that uploaded automatically to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, cloud footage governed by the very retention statute Aubrey had drafted, small-town retaliation would collide with constitutional law in a takedown that would expose a predatory probation scheme, extracting millions from hundreds of victims. If you are ready to see institutional racism taken down, like this video and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now, because you won't want to miss tomorrow's story of cops messing with the wrong people and finding out. Let's continue. The sky had cleared before Dr. Aubrey Hayes pulled onto Alia Street. The residential block stretched quiet and familiar before her. The same cracked sidewalks she'd walked as a child, the same dogwood trees now bare for autumn, the same sense of nothing ever changing in Willow Creek, Georgia, except the slow accumulation of years. She'd made this drive from Emory University in Atlanta many times in the past month, each trip carrying another prescription, another specialist consultation report, another increment in her mother's cautious optimism about managing hypertension without surgery. Today's cargo sat in the CVS bag on her passenger seat. Lisinopril, a beta blocker her mother's cardiologist had finally agreed to try after the previous medication caused persistent dizziness. Simple errand, drive, drop off the prescription, check her mother's blood pressure readings from the past week, maybe stay for dinner if Serena Hayes insisted, which she would, because that's what mothers did when their daughters drove from Atlanta on a Thursday afternoon. Aubrey scanned Alia Street for parking. Her mother's house stood 2 blocks north, the pale yellow ranch with the repainted shutters visible from here. Every spot along the curb was occupied except one, a gap beside a fire hydrant that had seen better decades. The hydrant's red paint had faded to rust orange, peeling away in patches that exposed grey metal underneath. No curb marking, no yellow paint designating a no parking zone. Just the hydrant itself, half forgotten by municipal maintenance, standing like a relic from when Willow Creek still had a volunteer fire department instead of the regional service that now covered 3 counties. Aubrey pulled into the space with the measured precision of someone who parallel parked in Atlanta for 2 decades. She shifted into park, engaged the emergency brake, and reached for the measuring tape she kept in her center console, a habit formed during the months she'd spent drafting the Georgia Vehicle and Traffic Law Modernization Act, when every parking regulation had to be tested against real-world application. She stepped out into the cool afternoon air. The street remained empty, except for a gardener's truck 3 houses down, and the distant sound of a leaf blower. Aubrey extended the measuring tape from her car's rear bumper to the hydrant's center valve, legal under OCGA section, the subsection she personally drafted in consultation with the Georgia Fire Chiefs Association, the Georgia Municipal Association, and 3 traffic engineers who testified before the Senate Transportation Committee. The statute was explicit. Parking within that distance of a fire hydrant was prohibited unless the curb bore no marking and the hydrant's identifying paint covered less than a certain percentage of its surface. The compromise had been deliberate, a way to balance public safety with the reality that Georgia's smaller municipalities had thousands of forgotten hydrants with no budget for repainting and no resources for remarking every curb. Aubrey had written the visibility threshold into the law specifically to prevent arbitrary enforcement, to create an objective standard that protected both firefighters' access and citizens' right to park on public streets they paid taxes to maintain. This hydrant qualified, paint coverage perhaps generous estimate, no curb paint whatsoever, completely legal parking under the amended statute. Aubrey locked her Honda Accord, prescription bag in hand, and started walking north toward her mother's house. The afternoon felt suspended in that particular stillness unique to small Georgia towns. Not quite cold enough for coats, not warm enough for short sleeves. The light slanting through bare branches with the golden quality that made photographers worship autumn. She'd walked perhaps a short distance when she heard the vehicle approaching from behind. The engine note registered first. The distinctive rumble of a large SUV accelerating hard. Then came the sharp whoop of a siren, brief and declarative. Aubrey turned to see a Willow Creek County Sheriff's Tahoe flip a U-turn in the middle of Alia Street. Emergency lights igniting in rapid blue and red sequence, positioning itself directly behind her Honda. Sheriff Harlan Decker emerged from the driver's side with a particular body language of authority, exercised so routinely it had become muscle memory. 6'1", the kind of build that had been athletic years ago and was now sustained by intimidation rather than conditioning. His uniform showed the careful press of someone who understood that appearance mattered, that a crisp shirt and mirror-shine boots communicated power before a single word was spoken. He walked toward Aubrey's car, not toward Aubrey herself, his attention fixed on the Honda's position relative to the hydrant. His right hand rested on his duty belt near his radio, a practiced gesture that looked casual, but positioned him for rapid response. His left hand held a citation book already open, pen ready. Aubrey stopped walking. She turned fully to face the scene unfolding behind her, her legal mind already categorizing the encounter: investigatory stop, vehicle code enforcement, no reasonable articulable suspicion of her personally because she was no longer in the vehicle. Decker hadn't called out to her, hadn't identified himself, hadn't established any connection between her and the parked car. Decker circled the Honda slowly, examining its position from multiple angles. He crouched beside the rear bumper, eyeballing the distance to the hydrant. He photographed the car with his department-issued smartphone. He photographed the hydrant. He stood and walked to the Tahoe, reached inside, and retrieved a measuring tape from the center console. Aubrey watched him measure, watched him check the figure twice, watched him photograph the extended tape measure showing the distance. Then, Decker looked up and saw her standing on the sidewalk, prescription bag visible in her hand, professional attire suggesting someone heading home from work or an appointment. His expression shifted through recognition, not of her personally, not yet, but of the mathematical problem now facing him. The car was legally parked. The woman wasn't in it. The stop had no probable cause that would survive even basic scrutiny. Some officers would have retreated at that moment, would have climbed back into their vehicle, killed the lights, driven away with nothing more than the minor embarrassment of an unnecessary stop. Some officers understood when they'd made an error and possessed the wisdom to correct course before the error became something permanent. Harlan Decker was not that kind of officer. He closed the citation book, returned it to his Tahoe, activated his body cam with a deliberate tap to the unit mounted on his chest. The small LED indicator shifted from amber to solid red, recording in high definition. High-definition audio capture at broadcast quality. Timestamp synchronized with GPS coordinates. All data uploading to the Willow Creek County Evidence Server in real-time packets according to the retention protocol specified in OCGA section. The body cam statute Aubrey had drafted in consultation with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police, and civil rights organizations who'd spent decades fighting for transparency in law enforcement. The statute that mandated immediate cloud upload, that prohibited local deletion, that created an evidence chain unbreakable by individual officers or even sheriffs. Decker walked toward Aubrey with purpose. She waited, standing on the public sidewalk outside her mother's neighborhood, prescription bag in hand, watching her own legislation activate in real time around an encounter that should never have begun. Decker stopped a short distance away, positioning himself to block her forward movement without physically touching her. His badge caught the afternoon light, a six-pointed star with sheriff engraved across the center. Years of county authority compressed into polished metal. His voice carried the flat certainty of someone who'd delivered this line hundreds of times before, demanding her license and registration while informing her she was getting a ticket and a tow. The body cam recorded everything in crisp clarity. Later, when the footage played on screens across Georgia, every word would be preserved with the kind of fidelity that left no room for interpretation, no space for competing narratives, no possibility of he said, she said ambiguity. The timestamp in the lower right corner would mark each second with GPS coordinates confirming location. Alia Street, Willow Creek, Georgia. Aubrey Hayes stood on the sidewalk with the controlled stillness of someone who'd spent years teaching law students how to think clearly under pressure. Her voice, when she responded, carried no anger, no nervousness, no performative deference, just the measured precision of a professor correcting a fundamental error. She explained the exact subsection she'd authored, OCGA section, including the specific language about hydrant visibility thresholds and curb markings. She referenced the legislative history, House bill passed by the Georgia General Assembly, effective. She mentioned the Senate Transportation Committee hearings where fire chiefs had testified about access requirements. She cited the Attorney General opinion that clarified the visibility standard for municipal enforcement purposes. Decker interrupted before she could finish the citation, asserting that he'd been sheriff for years and knew where people could park. His tone suggested the conversation was over, that her legal explanation was the kind of elaborate excuse he'd heard countless times from people trying to talk their way out of tickets they deserved. Years of badge authority compressed into one dismissive sentence. Years of deciding who got warnings and who got citations, who got to drive away and who got towed, who deserved the benefit of doubt and who deserved escalation. Aubrey's response remained level, academic, the kind of tone she used when a student cited a case without understanding its holding. She noted respectfully that the statute she was quoting went into effect and suggested he might want to reread title, chapter, article, emphasizing that the law had changed and that this parking space was currently lawful under the amended statute. The shift in Decker's expression was subtle but unmistakable. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed slightly. The body cam captured the moment with documentary precision. The instant when recognition replaced generic annoyance, when Aubrey transformed from anonymous woman with parking excuses to specific person with specific history. He knew her now, not just her name, which he hadn't bothered to ask, not just her face, which he'd probably seen in passing over the years when she visited her mother. He knew her as Dr. Aubrey Hayes, Emory University School of Law, constitutional law specialist, the professor who testified before the Willow Creek County Commission during his promotion hearing from captain to sheriff. She'd sat in that commission chamber with a stack of personnel files and incident reports documenting 3 sustained brutality complaints against then-Captain Decker, explaining why someone with his disciplinary record shouldn't be elevated to the county's highest law enforcement position. She'd cited case law and qualified immunity, discussed patterns of excessive force, referenced Department of Justice findings about agencies that promoted problem officers into leadership roles. The commission had promoted him anyway. Political loyalty trumped personnel records. Campaign contributions trumped constitutional concerns. And Decker had never forgotten the law professor who'd tried to stop his ascension, who'd publicly questioned his fitness for command, who treated his years of service like evidence in a criminal trial rather than credential for advancement. Standing on Alia Street with his body cam recording, Decker made a decision that thousands of Georgia citizens would eventually watch in disbelief. He closed his citation book, didn't write the parking ticket, didn't issue the warning, didn't return to his vehicle and drive away with the minor embarrassment of a stop that lacked probable cause. Instead, he pointed to a spot on the sidewalk near a utility pole, a short distance from where Aubrey stood, and ordered her to stand over there. Not a request, a command delivered with the expectation of immediate compliance. The tone of someone accustomed to obedience without question or explanation. Aubrey didn't move. Her voice remained steady, clinical. The same register she used when reading testimony transcripts in her criminal procedure seminar. She asked whether she was being detained, and if so, under what legal authority, noting that she was standing on a public sidewalk, not in a vehicle, and that he measured her car's distance from the hydrant himself, confirming that the parking was lawful. Decker reached for his radio instead of answering her question. He pressed the transmit button, turned slightly away from her as if the conversation had ended, spoke into the radio with practiced efficiency, requesting a second unit to Alia Street between Oak and Maple for a resistive subject refusing lawful orders. Resistive subject. The phrase carried weight in law enforcement coding that suggested physical struggle, implied danger, justified escalation. Aubrey had written expert reports analyzing that exact terminology, explaining how certain phrases in police reports functioned as legal talismans, creating judicial deference even when the underlying facts showed nothing resembling resistance. She stood motionless on the sidewalk, prescription bag in hand, having done nothing but explain the statute that made her parking lawful. The body cam captured her stillness, captured the absence of any threatening movement, captured Decker's radio call, creating a narrative that the video contradicted in real time. A second Willow Creek County unit arrived. Deputy Landon Forge, late 20s, years on the force, someone who'd probably learned law enforcement from Sheriff Decker himself. Forge parked his cruiser behind Decker's Tahoe, approached with hand near his weapon, eyes scanning Aubrey as if she might transform into a threat at any moment. Decker updated Forge with the practiced efficiency of someone coordinating tactical responses, claiming the subject had parked illegally, become argumentative when he attempted to issue a citation, refused to provide identification, and refused lawful orders to comply, leading to his decision to place her under arrest. Every element of that summary was false. The body cam had recorded the opposite: lawful parking, calm explanation of law, no request for identification, because Aubrey wasn't driving when Decker approached her, no lawful order, because Decker had no authority to command her movement on a public sidewalk. But Forge hadn't seen the encounter. He'd only heard Decker's description. And in that moment, Forge faced the choice that determines whether individual officers become complicit in corruption. Believe the evidence of his own absence, or believe his sheriff's word. Forge chose institutional loyalty. Aubrey spoke clearly. Her voice projected for the body cam's microphone, identifying herself as Dr. Aubrey Hayes, constitutional law professor at Emory University, and stating that she had drafted the parking statute Decker claimed she violated. She noted that the statute went into effect, that her parking was lawful under OCGA section, and that Decker was creating a false arrest record that his own body cam would contradict. Decker stepped closer. His voice dropped lower, meant for Aubrey rather than the camera, but the microphone captured it anyway with perfect fidelity. He questioned whether she thought she was smart, whether teaching law meant she was above the law, and announced he was placing her under arrest for obstruction of a law enforcement officer under OCGA section, disorderly conduct, and failure to obey a lawful order. He ordered her to turn around and put her hands behind her back. Aubrey could have ended it there, could have mentioned that her mother was Serena Hayes, former state senator, whose phone call to the governor would have Decker suspended within an hour. Could have referenced her position on the Georgia Judicial Reform Commission, her consultation work with the Attorney General's office, the fact that she'd trained half the judges in the Northern District on qualified immunity standards. She did none of those things. Instead, she turned slowly, placed the prescription bag on the sidewalk beside her feet, and put her hands behind her back. Because ending it immediately would have protected only herself, would have left every other person Decker had falsely arrested to navigate the system alone, without video evidence, without professional credentials, without the resources to fight back. Aubrey made the same calculated decision she'd made in countless depositions and expert witness appearances. Document everything. Let the misconduct fully develop. Create an evidence record so comprehensive that no defense attorney could spin it into ambiguity. The body cam recorded Decker applying handcuffs with unnecessary tightness. Metal digging into Aubrey's wrists hard enough to leave marks that would photograph well later. Compression that restricted circulation. Pain that was deliberate rather than incidental. Aubrey's voice remained clinical, as she noted for the record that the handcuffs were too tight, causing pain and restricting circulation, and that this was being recorded. Decker didn't adjust them. He guided her toward his Tahoe with a hand on her upper arm, grip firm enough to control movement, but not quite firm enough to constitute battery. He'd done this before, probably hundreds of times. The choreography of arrest performed with the muscle memory of routine. He opened the rear passenger door. No handles on the inside. Safety cage, separating front from back. Hard plastic bench seats designed for discomfort rather than transport. Aubrey bent to enter, awkward with hands cuffed behind her, dependent on Decker not to let her fall. Before closing the door, Decker reached for the prescription bag Aubrey had placed on the sidewalk. He picked it up, examined it briefly, carried it back to his Tahoe. He placed it on the hood, activated his body cam's close focus mode with a tap, and opened Aubrey's purse. The search happened on camera in full detail. Decker removed items one by one, examining each before placing it beside the purse. Wallet, car keys, phone, lipstick, tissue packet, hand sanitizer, pen. Then he reached the items that made his expression shift. Emory University School of Law faculty identification card. Dr. Aubrey M. Hayes, Professor of Constitutional Law, Employee ID number. Georgia Judicial Reform Commission identification badge. Aubrey M. Hayes, Commission member, Special Consultant on Law Enforcement Standards and Training. A printed document stapled in the upper left corner bearing the title indicating it was Attorney General opinion regarding fire hydrant parking and the visibility requirement interpretation under the relevant statute. Decker stared at the documents for seconds that the body cam timestamp tracked with precision. His jaw worked as if he were physically grinding down something too large to swallow. Then he gathered everything, stuffed it back into Aubrey's purse without the careful examination he'd used during removal, and closed the door, sealing Aubrey inside the mobile cage. He spoke to Forge in a voice the bodycam's external microphone barely captured, instructing him to follow to the jail and noting that this one was going to be complicated. Decker climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, pulled away from the curb. Aubrey sat in the back, wrists cuffed, hands numb. Prescription medication for her mother's blood pressure still sitting on the hood of Decker's Tahoe, where he'd forgotten it in his rush to conceal what he'd found. The body cam timestamp read. The drive to Willow Creek County Jail would take minutes, and every second would upload automatically to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation Evidence portal, the cloud server governed by OCGA section. The retention statute Aubrey had drafted in consultation with the GBI Digital Evidence Standards Committee. The system was deliberately designed to remove human discretion from evidence preservation. No local review before upload. No sheriff approval required. No opportunity for footage to mysteriously malfunction or accidentally erase. The moment a body cam stopped recording, a timer started. When that timer expired, the footage transmitted automatically, regardless of content, regardless of what it showed, regardless of whose career it might destroy. Aubrey had fought for that automation against resistance from sheriff's associations and police unions who insisted officers needed discretion to protect sensitive information. She'd won by citing case after case where discretion had functioned as deletion, where sensitive information had meant incriminating evidence, where officer safety had translated to cover-up. Now her own arrest existed in the cloud as minutes of documentation that Sheriff Harlan Decker could not access, could not edit, could not make disappear. At the GBI Regional Forensics Laboratory in Atlanta, senior digital evidence analyst Kendra Voss worked the evening shift monitoring automatic uploads from the state's counties. Most footage showed routine encounters, traffic stops, domestic calls, public intoxication arrests. Voss watched at double speed, flagging anything requiring supervisor review. Uses of force, officer-involved shootings, constitutional concerns. Decker's body cam footage loaded onto her screen. Voss started the playback at normal speed. Her attention partially divided between the video and the incident report metadata. Routine traffic stop in Willow Creek County. Illegal parking violation. Subject arrested for obstruction and disorderly conduct. Seconds into the footage, Voss stopped checking her other monitors. By minutes, she'd slowed the playback to normal speed and opened a secondary screen to take detailed notes. By minutes, the point where Aubrey explained the exact statute she had authored, Voss picked up her desk phone and called her supervisor, informing him she had a constitutional violation requiring Public Integrity Unit review that night. Lieutenant Preston Ruiz arrived minutes later, stood behind Voss's chair, and watched the footage in silence. When it reached the arrest sequence, the unnecessary handcuffs, the search incident to unlawful arrest, Ruiz reached for his own phone, stating he was calling Public Integrity immediately and flagging this for the Attorney General personally. He noted this wasn't just a bad arrest, but retaliation against someone with judicial reform credentials, predicting it would become a political nightmare. Voss finished watching the complete minutes. She documented timestamps for every significant moment, the initial stop, Aubrey's explanation of the statute, Decker's order to stand aside, the arrest, the discovery of Aubrey's identification, Decker's threat. She burned the footage to 3 separate secure storage systems according to evidence preservation protocol. She generated the incident summary report that would route automatically to Public Integrity. She attached her own analyst notes highlighting the constitutional violations visible on camera. The system processed her documentation with bureaucratic efficiency. The footage and supporting materials had been forwarded to the GBI Public Integrity Unit, with a priority flag indicating immediate supervisor review required. Public Integrity Unit Director Brielle Santos received the alert while having dinner with her family. She opened the secure app on her phone, read Voss's analyst summary, and immediately excused herself from the table to watch the footage on her department-issued laptop. Santos had called Attorney General Vaughan Pritchard at home, apologizing for the evening intrusion, but noting they had a situation requiring his immediate attention. A constitutional law professor, someone with judicial reform credentials, had been arrested by a county sheriff under circumstances that appeared clearly retaliatory. The body cam footage was unambiguous, and the professor's name was Aubrey Hayes. Silence on the line followed her revelation. Pritchard asked for confirmation that this was Dr. Aubrey Hayes, the Emory constitutional law professor. Santos confirmed it was the same Dr. Hayes who had drafted most of Georgia's criminal procedure reforms. She explained that Aubrey had been arrested for illegal parking beside a fire hydrant, except the parking appeared completely legal under the statute she personally wrote. The body cam showed her explaining the law to the sheriff before he arrested her anyway. Pritchard requested she send him the footage immediately, everything, promising to call back. Pritchard received the secure file transfer. He watched the footage once at normal speed, taking notes with the methodical attention of someone who'd spent years studying constitutional law under Aubrey's guidance at Emory. He watched it a second time, focusing on the legal issues: Fourth Amendment, seizure without probable cause, arrest without reasonable suspicion, search incident to unlawful arrest, possible retaliation for protected speech. He watched the third time as someone who'd known Aubrey Hayes for years, who'd taken 3 seminars from her, who'd worked as her research assistant during his second year, who'd learned to think like a constitutional lawyer by watching how she approached problems with relentless logical precision. The footage showed his mentor handcuffed on a residential street, hands behind her back, explaining the law calmly, while a sheriff with years of badge authority ignored every word she said. Pritchard called Director Santos back, announcing he was opening a criminal investigation into Sheriff Harlan Decker, effective immediately. He wanted a full forensic analysis of every arrest Decker made involving fire hydrant parking. He wanted financial records for any probation supervision companies operating in Willow Creek County. He wanted corporate ownership documents. He wanted to know if there was a systematic scheme, or if this was a one-time retaliation incident, and he wanted everything on his desk. Santos acknowledged he'd have it, but warned that this would create significant political pressure. Decker had connections to the county commission. He'd been sheriff for years. Taking him down meant taking on the entire Willow Creek power structure. Pritchard responded that they would take on the entire Willow Creek power structure. Then Dr. Hayes hadn't spent 2 decades teaching constitutional law, so county sheriffs could arrest her for following the statute she wrote. He instructed Santos to get him everything. Santos assembled the task force from her home office, calling analysts and field investigators, pulling them from evening plans and family obligations with the urgency of a case that had already escalated beyond routine investigation. The team had gathered at GBI headquarters in Atlanta, dividing responsibilities according to the documentation trail they needed to build. Financial Crimes Unit pulled incorporation records for Willow Creek Supervision Services filed. Principal owner Kendra Decker Voss, registered agent Harlan J. Decker business address matching the county sheriff's office. The corporate structure was barely concealed. Decker's sister-in-law owned the company. Decker served as registered agent. The business operated from county government property, and the incorporation date coincided exactly with the effective date of Aubrey's parking statute, suggesting Decker had read the new law, identified the enforcement opportunity, and created a probation company to profit from the citations he planned to write. Data Analysis Unit ran arrest statistics for Willow Creek County covering hundreds of arrests for fire hydrant parking violations, all of those arrests resulting in probation sentences. All of that probation was supervised by Willow Creek Supervision Services. Demographic breakdown showing most of arrestees were Black or Hispanic, despite Willow Creek's population being only a certain percentage minority. The numbers told the story with statistical clarity. This wasn't routine enforcement. This was targeted predatory prosecution designed to extract fees from specific demographic groups while funneling money into a company owned by the sheriff's family. Financial records showed Willow Creek Supervision Services had collected millions in probation fees, an average per defendant over approximately months of supervision. The fees included monthly supervision charges, drug testing, educational programs, administrative costs, late payment penalties, and various other charges that accumulated into debt traps. Most defendants couldn't escape. The evidence package was complete. Director Santos compiled everything into a comprehensive briefing document. The body cam footage with timestamp analysis, corporate ownership records, financial statements, arrest statistics, demographic data, and preliminary legal analysis identifying at least 7 criminal statutes. Decker appeared to have violated. She sent the complete package to Attorney General Pritchard with a priority flag. Pritchard, who hadn't slept, opened the document immediately. He read through page after page of documentary evidence showing exactly what Aubrey had suspected during her booking room conversation with Brielle Santos. Systematic predatory prosecution designed to extract wealth from vulnerable citizens while enriching the sheriff's family. Pritchard forwarded the complete briefing to Georgia Governor Barrett Klein with a cover memo outlining the investigation and requesting authorization for a press conference. Governor Klein read the briefing over morning coffee, watched the body cam footage twice, and called Pritchard, noting the catastrophic nature of the situation. A county sheriff had arrested a constitutional law professor for violating a law she wrote, and they discovered he was running a criminal enterprise through a family-owned probation company. This was national news. This would make Georgia look like it was still operating under Jim Crow. Pritchard suggested they could minimize the damage by getting ahead of it with full transparency, immediate consequences, showing that Georgia took constitutional violations seriously and moved quickly to hold corrupt officials accountable. The governor asked for his recommendation. Pritchard proposed a press conference on the Capitol steps where he would announce immediate suspension of Sheriff Decker without pay, GBI raid on Willow Creek Supervision Services, statewide moratorium on private misdemeanor probation companies pending comprehensive reform. They would play the body cam footage publicly. They would make clear that Georgia protected citizens' constitutional rights regardless of who violated them. Klein asked what happened if Marcus didn't want her. If she became a liability, Landon's cabin had been designed to make problems disappear. Piper Voss had disappeared in this cabin. Her remains were found, buried on the property's northeast corner, wrapped in the same plastic sheeting currently stored in Landon's shed. Memphis, Tennessee. Donovan Hale was arrested outside Mike's gambling den on the east side of town. He was counting cash when FBI agents surrounded him. Winnings from an evening of poker. Just another normal Friday night for a man who bought children for resale. When they searched his phone, the burner he used for trafficking business, they found text thread with Garrett. Package confirmed. Same location. I'll have transport ready. GPS history, showing trips to Landon's cabin over the past years. Photos of other children with prices listed. Contact list of buyers across states. Donovan Hale had been operating for years, bought and sold children. Most were never found until tonight. Benton County Sheriff's Department. Officer Blaine Decker was in his office when FBI agents walked in. He was eating a sandwich, pastrami on rye, watching highlights from last night's basketball game on his computer. Just another evening shift for a detective who'd buried 2 missing child cases. Detective Decker. Agent Lawson's voice was ice. We need to have a conversation about your handling of the Aubrey Whitaker case and the Piper Voss case, and your bank account showing cash deposits that coincidentally match the timeline of both investigations. Decker's sandwich dropped onto his desk. They found the evidence in his desk drawer, not even hidden well, just filed under closed cases. Aubrey's missing person report marked low priority despite being a kidnapping. Piper's case file with notes. Garrett called. Delay this one too. Usual FI. Bank deposit slips. Cash. Days before Aubrey was taken. Previous deposits cash. Week after Piper disappeared. Years on the force. Clean record until Garrett Voss started paying him per case to misfile paperwork, delay investigations, and tell grieving grandparents their concerns were probably nothing. For that amount, Blaine Decker had let a trafficking ring operate with police protection. For that amount, Piper Voss had died alone in a cabin. For that amount, Aubrey Whitaker had come within an hour of the same fate. I want my lawyer, Decker said. You'll need one, Lawson confirmed. Minutes past the deadline Garrett had given Aubrey. But Aubrey wasn't at Landon's cabin. She was at St. Vincent's Hospital in Little Rock, in the pediatric ward, wearing a hospital gown with cartoon animals on it, eating Jell-O while a doctor examined the rope burns on her wrists and catalogued her injuries for the official medical report. Serena sat beside her the whole time, holding her hand when the doctor touched the bruises, explaining everything before it happened, making sure Aubrey knew she was safe. Aubrey's grandparents arrived. Harlan and Evelyn Whitaker had driven from Asheville, North Carolina. Harlan was founder of a pharmaceutical company worth millions. Evelyn was retired school teacher. Both looked like they'd aged in days. They burst into Aubrey's room and stopped dead at the sight of her. Alive, safe, real. Grandpa. Aubrey's voice broke on the word. Grandma. She tried to get out of bed, but the IV line caught. Serena gently untangled it. Then Aubrey was in her grandparents' arms, all 3 of them crying, holding each other like they'd never let go again. We thought... Harlan couldn't finish. When they said you were taken, we thought... The biker saved me, Aubrey said between sobs. The scary one with the beard. I gave him my note, and he came. They all came. Evelyn looked at Serena. Thank you. Thank you. How can we ever? You don't need to thank us, Serena said quietly. You just need to love her, which you clearly do. Outside in the hallway, Barrett stood with Agent Lawson. Final count, Barrett asked. 6 arrests, Lawson confirmed. Garrett Voss, Landon Voss, Donovan Hale, Officer Blaine Decker, Felicia Lang. She's the forger who created the fake custody documents. And Brody Nash, the motel manager who provided the no-questions-asked rooms. Patricia Harlow, the school administrator, has been fired and her teaching license is under review for criminal negligence, but no charges yet. And the charges against Garrett. Lawson's expression was grim satisfaction. Kidnapping, child endangerment, human trafficking, conspiracy to traffic, ransom demand, illegal restraint, assault on a minor, and first-degree murder for Piper Voss. Murder. Her remains were recovered from Landon's property. Medical examiner confirms cause of death as asphyxiation. Time of death matches the period when she was reported missing. Garrett Voss is facing death penalty. Barrett nodded slowly. And Aubrey? She'll need therapy. Years of it, probably. But she's got her grandparents. She's got resources. She's got a chance. Lawson paused. Because of you. Because of that note she trusted you with. Not me, Barrett said. Us. Hundreds of brothers who decided a 7-year-old was worth mobilizing for. Agent Lawson extended her hand. The FBI thanks you officially, on record. You preserved evidence, coordinated witnesses, and prevented what could have been a disaster if you'd gone vigilante. You did this right. Barrett shook her hand. We just showed up. Aubrey did the hard part. In the hospital room, Aubrey was falling asleep in her grandmother's arms, safe, warm, fed, protected. Her last words before sleep took her. The scary man wasn't scary. He was just big. And Evelyn Whitaker, holding her granddaughter, looked up at the Hells Angels patches visible through the doorway. Hundreds of bikers who'd converged on Arkansas to save a child they'd never met, and understood something she never had before. Monsters don't wear leather and tattoos. Monsters wear polo shirts and friendly smiles. And sometimes, the scariest-looking people in the room are exactly the ones you need. Days later, the Benton County Courthouse was packed. Every seat filled. Standing room only in the back. News cameras lined the hallway outside. This wasn't just a local story anymore. This was national. Garrett Voss sat at the defendant's table wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. His bail hearing had been set for millions. A man who'd stolen from his own mother and gambled away wasn't making bail anytime soon. The charges were read. First-degree kidnapping, human trafficking of a minor, conspiracy to traffic, ransom demand, illegal restraint, assault on a minor, first-degree murder in the death of Piper Ann Voss. Garrett's public defender requested bail reduction. My client has no prior convictions, Your Honor. He has ties to the community. He has ties to a trafficking network operating across 3 states, the prosecutor interrupted. He murdered his stepdaughter and would have done the same to Aubrey Whitaker if not for the intervention of civilians. He is a flight risk and a danger to children everywhere. The judge, Margaret Bennett, years old, years on the bench, grandmother of 4, looked at Garrett for a long moment. Bail denied. Trial date set. Defendant remanded to custody without possibility of parole until trial. Next case. The gavel came down. Garrett Voss would never be free again. The others, Landon Voss, arrested at his cabin, charged with accessory to murder, accessory to kidnapping, human trafficking. Found guilty months later, sentenced to years in federal prison. No parole eligibility. Donovan Hale, the buyer, charged with human trafficking, conspiracy to traffic, counts of purchasing children for exploitation. Evidence on his phone led to the recovery of other children and the arrest of additional traffickers across the network. Sentenced to years. His trafficking ring, operating for years across states, dismantled completely. Officer Blaine Decker, years on the force, arrested for bribery, obstruction of justice, corruption, accessory after the fact to kidnapping and murder. His badge was stripped before he even made it to booking, sentenced to years, pension revoked, law enforcement career destroyed. At his sentencing, the judge said, "You were entrusted to protect the vulnerable, and you sold them. There is no lower betrayal." Felicia Lang, the forger. Her laptop contained templates for fake custody documents used in previous kidnappings. Sentenced to years. Her paralegal license had been revoked. She'd been creating fake legal documents for criminals ever since. Brody Nash, the motel manager who provided no questions asked rooms and claimed his security cameras were broken when Aubrey stayed there. Sentenced to years as an accessory. His motel was permanently closed by the county health department. Patricia Harlow, the school administrator who'd accepted Garrett's forged papers with seconds of review. No criminal charges, just negligence, not malice. But she was fired from Oakwood Elementary. Her teaching license was revoked. At the school board hearing, she sat silent while parent after parent demanded accountability. Her last words, "I thought I was helping. I thought the paperwork was real." Years of education work ended because she chose convenience over a child's safety. After rescue, Aubrey was living with her grandparents in Asheville, North Carolina. Her father, Ronan Whitaker, had been emergency deployed home from Japan. He'd arrived after Aubrey's rescue and hadn't let her out of his sight since. The house on Maple Ridge Drive was exactly as Aubrey remembered. Her bedroom still had the same purple comforter, the same stuffed animals on the shelf, the same glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that her mum had put up before the cancer, before the drowning. That maybe wasn't an accident, before everything fell apart. But some things were different now. There were new locks on all the doors, installed by Harlan and 3 other brothers who'd driven to Asheville just to make sure Aubrey felt safe. There was a security system monitored with panic buttons in Aubrey's room and the kitchen. There was a therapist, Dr. Tatum Ellis, child trauma specialist, who came to the house twice a week because Aubrey wasn't ready to go to an office yet. And there were new rules. Aubrey was never alone. School pickup required 2 forms of ID verification plus a phone call to her father. No overnight trips, no camps, nothing that separated her from family. Not because they were being overprotective, because Aubrey had asked for these rules, needed them. Safety wasn't automatic anymore. It had to be built, verified, confirmed every single day. The therapy. Dr. Ellis sat cross-legged on the floor of Aubrey's bedroom during their 3rd session. Not in a chair like a typical therapist. On the floor at Aubrey's level, playing with Play-Doh. "Can you tell me about the gas station?" Dr. Ellis asked gently. Aubrey's hands worked the pink Play-Doh, squeezing it, shaping it into nothing in particular. "I was scared," Aubrey whispered. "Garrett said if I told anyone, he'd hurt Grandma and Grandpa. He said he had their address. He said his friend was watching their house. But you told anyway." "I didn't tell with words." Aubrey looked up. "I told with the note because he couldn't hear a note. That was very smart. I was scared the biker wouldn't find it or wouldn't believe it, or would give it to the police and they'd tell Garrett." Aubrey's voice got smaller because the police lady didn't help me when she pulled us over. I wanted to tell her, but Garrett was looking at me and I couldn't make my voice work. Officer Vance knows that now. Dr. Ellis said she wishes she'd asked you to step out of the car. She wishes she'd looked closer. She's changing how she does traffic stops because of you. Really? Really? You taught her something important. That sometimes kids are too scared to speak up, so adults have to look harder. Aubrey shaped the Play-Doh into a small boot, purple, because that was the only color she'd chosen today. The biker's boots were black, she said, and really big. And I thought maybe if I could just touch them, just hide the note there, maybe he'd be strong enough to fight Garrett. Because Garrett was scared of bikers, I could tell. You chose the scariest looking person in that parking lot. Yeah. Aubrey looked up, green eyes meeting Dr. Ellis's, because scary-looking people were nicer than the nice-looking man. Dr. Ellis made a note, not for the session record, for herself. A reminder that children understand more than adults give them credit for. "You're very brave, Aubrey. I was very scared. Brave people are always scared. That's what makes them brave." After rescue, Aubrey returned to school. Not Oakwood Elementary. Her grandparents had transferred her to Mountain View Academy, a private school with better security and verification protocols. Her first day, Preston drove down from Arkansas to walk her into the building, not as a biker. As a man in slacks and a button-down shirt, his Hells Angels vest left at home, his detective instincts very much present. "You ready?" Preston asked, kneeling beside Aubrey in the parking lot. She was wearing new purple sneakers, light-up ones, just like her old pair. But these laces were tied, both of them. Tight double knots her father had done that morning. "What if the teacher asks where I was?" Aubrey whispered. "You tell her you were sick and missed some school. That's all you have to say. Your grandparents already talked to the principal. They know what happened. But your classmates don't need to know unless you want to tell them. I don't want to tell them." "Then we don't tell them." Preston offered his hand. "Come on." I'll walk you to your classroom. Make sure you know where everything is." They walked through the front doors together, Aubrey's small hand in Preston's large one. The front office staff had been briefed. New procedures courtesy of Aubrey's law. Legislation already being drafted in Arkansas requiring schools to verify custody documents through government databases before releasing children. Seconds of digital verification. That's all it would have taken to stop Garrett at Oakwood Elementary. Now it would be mandatory. Kidnapping attempts would be prevented in the next months because of that law. Children who wouldn't go through what Aubrey had gone through. All because a 7-year-old girl had been brave enough to hide a note in a stranger's boot. After rescue, Barrett got a phone call on a Saturday. He was in his garage rebuilding a carburetor on a Harley, grease under his fingernails, classic rock playing on the radio. "Mr. Vaughn," an older man's voice, formal. "This is Harlan Whitaker, Aubrey's grandfather." Barrett straightened immediately, wiped his hands on a rag. "Mr. Whitaker, how's Aubrey doing?" "That's why I'm calling." Harlan's voice was warm. "We're having a small celebration tomorrow. Aubrey's 8th birthday. She specifically asked if you and your, brothers could attend. Just a few of you, if that's possible. She wants to thank you in person." Barrett felt his throat tighten. "We'd be honored. Tomorrow, Maple Ridge Drive. I'll text you the address. And Mr. Vaughn, bring that vest. Aubrey wants to see the patches. She's been drawing them in art therapy. Aubrey's 8th birthday. The backyard of the Whitaker house was decorated with purple streamers and balloons. A cake shaped like a motorcycle sat on the patio table. Chocolate with purple frosting. Happy birthday, Aubrey, written in green icing to match her eyes. People. Small gathering. Family, close friends, Dr. Ellis, and 5 Hells Angels who'd driven for a birthday party. Barrett, Serena, Preston, Harlan and Landon stood somewhat awkwardly near the fence, big men in leather vests surrounded by balloons and 8-year-olds. Aubrey ran up to them the moment they arrived. She'd gained back the weight, plus more. Her strawberry blonde hair was clean, brushed, tied back with a purple ribbon. The bruises were gone. The rope burns had faded to white lines on her wrists, scars that would remain, but were healing. She was wearing a purple dress and new light-up sneakers, both laces tied. "You came." Aubrey's voice was pure joy. "Of course we came." Barrett knelt down to her level. "Happy birthday, Aubrey. I made you something." Aubrey pulled a folded piece of paper from her dress pocket, handed it to Barrett. He unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing, crayon and marker. A little girl with strawberry blonde hair standing next to a huge man with a grey beard and a vest covered in patches. Above them, in careful child handwriting, "Thank you for believing me." Barrett had faced down riots, survived bar fights, buried brothers, seen things in the Marines that still woke him up at night sweating. But looking at this drawing, at this child's gratitude for something that should have been automatic, should have been guaranteed, he felt tears burn his eyes. "This is the best gift I've ever received," Barrett said quietly. "Really, really." Aubrey threw her arms around his neck, hugged him tight, and Barrett, sergeant at arms, scariest-looking man in most rooms, hugged her back gently, carefully, like she might break. Over Aubrey's shoulder, he saw her father, Ronan Whitaker, watching from the patio, former military himself. He nodded once, deep, a warrior's acknowledgement. "Thank you for bringing my daughter home. You're welcome." The conversation happened without words. Later, Aubrey Lynn Whitaker stood in front of people at the Arkansas State Capitol building. She was 9 years old now, 4th grade, honor roll student, still in therapy, but thriving. She wore a purple dress for the occasion. Purple had become her color, the color of her sneakers that day at the gas station, the color she'd chosen to represent courage. The occasion was the official signing of Aubrey's law, Senate bill, requiring all schools in Arkansas to digitally verify custody documents before releasing children to non-parental guardians. Governor Lila Donovan stood beside Aubrey at the podium. Behind them, a crowd of legislators, law enforcement, child advocates, and Hell's Angels who'd ridden to Little Rock for this moment. "Aubrey," Governor Donovan said gently, "would you like to say a few words?" Aubrey stepped to the microphone. Someone adjusted it down to her height. She looked out at the crowd, found Barrett in the third row. He nodded. "You've got this." "My name is Aubrey Lynn Whitaker," she said, voice small but steady. "When I was 7 years old, a bad man took me from my school. He had fake papers. My teacher looked at them for seconds and believed them. She didn't call my dad or my grandparents. She didn't check with anyone. She just let him take me." The room was completely silent. For days, I was scared all the time. Adults kept seeing me and not helping. A police officer, a gas station worker, a truck driver, people in a motel. They all saw something was wrong. But nobody asked, nobody checked. Nobody wanted to cause trouble. Aubrey's hands gripped the podium. "So, I wrote a note on a candy wrapper with an eyebrow pencil I stole, and I hid it in a biker's boot because he was the biggest, scariest person I could find. And I thought, if he's strong enough to look scary, maybe he's strong enough to save me." A few people in the crowd were crying now. He was. Aubrey looked directly at Barrett. They all were. Bikers came to save me. Not because they knew me, not because they were paid, because I asked for help and they listened. She turned back to the crowd. "This law means teachers have to check, have to verify, have to make sure kids are safe before letting them go. It takes seconds to check a computer database. Seconds could have stopped the bad man from taking me." Governor Donovan placed a gentle hand on Aubrey's shoulder. "Since this law was drafted," Aubrey continued, reading from notes Dr. Ellis had helped her prepare, "other kids have been protected. Times a person with fake papers tried to take a child and the school computer said, 'No, this isn't real.' Kids who didn't have to be scared like I was." Aubrey folded her notes. "I learned something that I want other kids to know. Bad people don't always look bad. The man who took me looked nice, wore nice clothes, smiled a lot. But he was the scariest person I ever met. And the bikers, the ones who looked big and mean and covered in tattoos, they were the gentlest people I've ever known." She looked at the Hell's Angels in the crowd. "You don't need a motorcycle to protect someone. You don't need tattoos or muscles or a leather vest. You just need to care enough to look closer, to ask questions, to believe kids when they're scared." Aubrey's voice got stronger. "If you see a kid who looks scared, believe them. Even if the adult with them seems nice, even if it might be awkward, even if you might be wrong, ask anyway. Look closer, care enough to cause trouble." The room erupted in applause, people standing, clapping for a 9-year-old girl who'd survived hell and come out the other side braver than most adults would ever be. Governor Donovan signed the bill. Aubrey's signature went next to hers, ceremonial but meaningful. Aubrey's law was official. And in the back of the room, Hell's Angels stood in respectful silence, leather vests gleaming, patches identical, not a single one of them dry-eyed. The message. This story isn't really about bikers or patches or motorcycles thundering down highways at sunset. It's about a 7-year-old girl who had every reason to give up, who'd tried 3 times to escape and been punished each time, who'd watched adults see her fear and look away, who had nothing and no one, choosing to try one more time anyway. It's about a choice. Aubrey could have stayed silent in that gas station, could have gotten back in Garrett's car, could have accepted that this was how her story ended. Instead, she made a plan. Stole an eyebrow pencil, saved a candy wrapper, untied her shoelace, picked her moment, and trusted the scariest looking person she could find to be exactly what she needed, strong enough to fight for her. And here's what makes that choice extraordinary. Aubrey understood something most adults forget. People who look dangerous aren't always dangerous, and people who look safe aren't always safe. Garrett Voss looked like somebody's nice uncle, wore polo shirts and khakis, smiled warmly, had forged documents that looked official, convinced a school administrator in seconds. He was a monster wearing a friendly face. Barrett Vaughan looked like every parent's nightmare. Covered in tattoos, leather vest with skull patches. Hell's Angels sergeant at arms. He was a protector wearing an intimidating face. Aubrey saw past both masks. And that wisdom, that 7-year-old's understanding that appearances lie, saved her life. There are Aubreys everywhere. Right now in your town, in your state, in places that look safe and normal, there are children being hurt by people who smile in public. There are kids sitting in restaurants with adults who grip their wrists too tight. There are children in cars at gas stations, eyes screaming for help while their mouths stay silent. There are students being picked up from school by people with forged papers and friendly explanations. And there are witnesses everywhere. People who see, people who notice, people who feel that something's wrong. But most of them do what Vaughan Pritchard did, what Brielle Tate did, what Officer Vance did. They look away. They choose comfort over courage. They choose not my business over this child needs help. They choose assumptions over verification. And children suffer because of those choices. You don't need a Hell's Angels vest to be a protector. You don't need brothers or chrome motorcycles or decades of riding experience. You need one thing: the willingness to look closer when something feels wrong. Pay attention. When a child hesitates before getting in a car, ask questions. When a kid has bruises and a shaky voice, don't accept "they fell" as an answer. When an adult grips a child too tightly, speaks for them constantly, won't let them out of sight, trust your instincts. When paperwork seems rushed or verification seems inadequate, slow down, check, verify, cause trouble, be awkward, risk being wrong. Because here's what Patricia Harlow learned too late. Being wrong is embarrassing. Being right and staying silent is devastating. Ask the uncomfortable questions. Make the calls that feel intrusive. Trust the feeling in your gut that says, "This isn't right." Be the person a scared child can ask for help. Be the adult who looks closer instead of looking away. Be the one who chooses courage over comfort. Aubrey taught us something profound that Friday afternoon. Sometimes the smallest voice is the one worth the loudest response. She whispered, "Please," to a stranger, and men heard it across 3 states and answered with thunder. Not because she was their daughter, not because they were paid, not because it was easy or convenient or safe, because she asked. And because they understood that brotherhood, real brotherhood, means standing between evil and the innocent, no matter the cost. Epilogue. Present day. It's been years since that Friday at the Pilot truck stop. Aubrey is 10 years old now, 5th grade, president of her student council, volunteers at the local children's hospital reading to younger kids, takes karate classes twice a week. Not because she's afraid, but because she likes feeling strong. She still has nightmares sometimes, still flinches when strangers touch her shoulder, still checks that doors are locked 3 times before bed. Healing doesn't work that way. You don't just get over being kidnapped. The scars remain. Visible ones on her wrists, invisible ones in her heart. But she's not defined by what happened to her. She's defined by what she did about it. And she's become something extraordinary. An advocate. Aubrey speaks at schools now, teaching kids about safety, teaching them that it's okay to say no to adults, okay to yell, okay to run, okay to ask scary-looking people for help if the nice-looking ones are hurting you. She's taught students the phrase that might save their lives. This person is not my parent. Garrett Voss is serving consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. He'll die in prison. The others are serving their time. Donovan Hale's trafficking network led to children being recovered, families reunited, lives saved. Officer Decker's arrest triggered an internal investigation that uncovered corruption in precincts across Arkansas. Officers were fired, were charged. The system that had protected predators for years was burned down and rebuilt. And Aubrey's law has been adopted by states beyond Arkansas. More are considering it. Hundreds of thousands of children are safer because verification is now mandatory. All because one little girl refused to stay silent. the plastic Spider-Man figure. Remember that from the competitor story? Aubrey doesn't have one of those, but she does have a pink starburst wrapper, the original, the one she wrote her note on. The FBI returned it after the trial, preserved in an evidence bag. Aubrey keeps it in a frame on her bedroom wall, next to Barrett's drawing, next to the photo from her 8th birthday. Her standing between Barrett and Serena, smiling, safe. Reminders that courage comes in small packages, that help comes from unexpected places, that sometimes the person society tells you to fear is exactly the person who will save you. If this story moved you, subscribe to Gentle Bikers and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment and tell us who was your protector, or who did you protect when nobody else would. Let us know you stand with Aubrey. With every scared child who's waiting for someone to notice, with every person who's brave enough to ask the awkward questions and make the uncomfortable calls. Because here's the truth, Aubrey proved that golden hour at exit. You don't need a patch to be a protector. You don't need a motorcycle or a beard or tattoos. You just need to be the person who stops, who looks, who listens, who cares enough to act when a child whispers, please. The next Aubrey might be in a restaurant you're eating at right now, at a gas station you stop at tomorrow, in a store you're shopping in next week. Will you see her? Will you look closer? Will you be the one who causes trouble because a child's safety matters more than avoiding awkwardness? The choice is yours. Make it count. The sun sets over Asheville on a warm evening. Through the window of a house on Maple Ridge Drive, you can see a little girl with strawberry blonde hair doing homework at her desk. Her purple light-up sneakers, laces tied tight, sit by her bed. On her wall, a framed candy wrapper, pink words written in brown eyebrow pencil, shaky but clear. He's not my dad. He has a gun. Please help. A reminder of the worst days of her life, and proof that even in the darkest moments, courage whispers. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, someone hears it